The Women's Rights Convention at Seneca Falls in 1848 changed the views of American citizens on how women should be treated in society because it began the women's suffrage movement. The convention brought forth the passing of laws so women would be equal to men because laws of the time alienated the female rights.
Before the convention, women had very few rights and even fewer if they married. A married woman could be framed for something she did not do by her husband and would most likely be sentenced anyways because women could not assemble a jury of peers. One of the most well-known rights that women were lacking was the right to vote.
In addition, when a woman got married, everything that she owned or inherited went to her husband. This particular detail stretched as far as the man having custody over their children, and in the case of divorce, they would be taken away from the woman. The woman wasn't even technically allowed to have a bank account. A man in marrying gives up no right, but a woman every right, even the most sacred of all, the right to be her own person. Personal freedom is the first right to be proclaimed, and that does not and cannot now belong to the relation of wife. To the Financial Development, from Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
Believe it or not, the idea of the convention did not necessarily come from the fact that women were deprived of their God-given rights. It was because they were not treated as equals in other countries. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott went to an anti-slavery convention in London in 1840 and were denied the opportunity to speak because they were women.
This occurrence sparked the idea of hosting a convention for their own rights. On July 19th and 20th in 1848, over 200 people, men and women, gathered in Seneca Falls, New York to fight for women's rights.
Initially, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott intended on only women attending the first day of the convention. However, many men attended and forced their way into the church that was hosting it in order to support the cause.
During the convention, a document was written to resolve the conflict that women were facing. The document was called the Declaration of Sentiments, which was an edited version of the Declaration of Independence and was composed to ridicule the gender-specific language that was used. An example of the way that the original document was altered in favor of female is, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of those who suffer from it to refuse allegiance to it and to insist upon the institution of a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness."
Most of these words were original to the Declaration of Independence. However, they added that all men and women are created equal. The ladies felt like everything that had been previously stated in the Declaration of Independence should apply to women as well. Although there were hundreds of men and women who supported the cause, there were even some women who opposed to this idea. They believed that the cause was unimportant and women didn't need the same rights as men. The Declaration of Sentiments was passed at the convention, but only by a slight amount.
At the convention, part of Elizabeth Cady Stanton's speech said, "And as strange as it may seem to many, we now demand our right to vote according to the declaration of the government under which we live." As well as the right to vote, the women wanted the other political rights and freedoms that men had always possessed, that were stated in the Declaration of Independence. In addition, women wanted to be separated from men so that they would be able to earn money for themselves. Another thing that Stanton expressed in her speech was, "The world has never yet seen a truly great and virtuous nation, because in the degradation of women, the very fountains of life are poisoned at their source."
Elizabeth Cady Stanton was claiming that since no nation in the world had ever treated women fairly and equally, no nation has ever truly been great. The women are their mothers and wives of the men, and in return deserve respect from the men in their life whom they have aided, nurtured, and cared for.
After the convention, people claimed that a discussion about animals gaining rights would be less opposed than saying that women should get rights. A few days after the convention, many attendees returned to take their names off the Declaration of Sentiments in order to avoid persecution.
An editorial on the convention said that the ladies who were part of the convention wanted men to be held to the same standards as women. An example of these standards included men wearing nice clothing even if it was uncomfortable, just so that they would look attractive, because women were obligated to wear tight dresses.
After the convention, the women of America began to try to get the laws that controlled their lives changed, and it wasn't until years later that important figures like Susan B. Anthony joined the movement. Anthony came from a Quaker family that strongly supported women's rights. Anthony and Stanton quickly became very close friends and supported each other greatly.
In 1869, as the movement became more popular, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony decided to host the first ever National American Women's Suffrage Association meeting at Anthony's house, because women still had not acquired the right to vote.
In 1920, after over 70 years of fighting, the 19th Amendment was passed, finally giving women the right to vote, and along with that, many other freedoms. However, some may argue that even today, women are still not equal to men. The overall conflict of female oppression and lack of rights began to come to a compromise with the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention, which was followed by a countrywide movement for the rights of women.